Hello, everyone. All right, so I put out a poll. By the time this comes out, this will probably be out in December, but in September, I put out a poll asking if you guys would want to hear a podcast about fat liberation and sex, essentially, fat sex. This is that podcast. Now, something I didn't realize is that this podcast was originally posted in 2018. I went to their official website and there have been no additional updates. They only ran 3 episodes and then they never posted again. We're going to go ahead and listen to the first episode. We'll probably get through about half of it today and then I'll record half of it for tomorrow. But yeah, so y'all were all for this, so we're just going to jump right in.
All right. Oh my gosh. This is the Fat as Fuck podcast.
Yeah, I forgot to mention the podcast is titled Fat as Fuck. Already though, mic quality isn't great. Like, I know my mic quality could be better, and honestly, I'm going to end up getting a new. At the time of this recording, I'm hoping that by the time this video goes up, I have a new mic. But at the time of this recording, I'm already looking into getting a new mic because this one is starting to go on the fritz. But if I'm going to do a podcast, I'm going to invest in like a decent mic and learn how to edit some of the noise, the background noise out of the video and some of that staticky sound. I used to have that when I was Let's Playing, and I learned that you just need a mic protector on it, so I'm wondering if she doesn't have a mic protector on her mic. But anyway, let's just listen.
Hopefully I'll have some cooler music in there. I'm Michaela. I'm a sociologist, feminist, and fat activist, writer, speaker, now podcaster. I'm really interested in fat stuff, inequalities, race, class, gender, but also obviously sexuality. Oh yeah, I'm a super fat, femme, queer white girl, cisgendered, 30-something. I'm Sarah. I am a writer for the blog notblueatall.com, and I'm fat. I call myself a death fatty, which harkens back to Web 2.0 blog days. Death fatty was, I think, anyone over a size 26 at the time being deemed as like a cutoff for being able to shop in brick and mortar stores. Anyway, I am weird and geeky, and I laugh a lot, and I share my struggles. I am known for talking about the things we're not supposed to talk about, so that's kind of why I'm so excited to be doing this podcast with Michaela, but also because she's my best friend, and she's amazing, and I'm just happy to support anything she's doing, always. We talk about this stuff all the time already, so it's pretty awesome that we're sharing this with you as well. You can be in on our ridiculosity. I just said that. I think a lot about the things that are taboo or supposed to be taboo in society and how much that robs us of our authentic life or who we're really meant to be. So I'll probably use the word authenticity a lot because that's just where I'm at. I'm a cisgendered 40-year-old spinster, #butter spinster, single lady, bisexual, but kind of maybe we'll talk about terminology in the future. That's kind of up in the air too. Just sick of all the what has always been mentality really and having to fall within the lines of
Okay, so I just want to say I think their introductions are a little too rambly. Like this isn't necessarily related to the content, but I mean kind of related to the content, but I mean your introductions are a little rambly. Granted, I've been guilty of that myself before, but this you're taking kind of forever to get to the point. And really when you're introducing yourself, it should be in relation to what the podcast will be about. So discussing your sexuality was fine, but when you're talking about like the different intersectionalities and stuff, really you should be trying to tie that back around to sex and or fat liberation and not get too far lost in the weeds for an introduction, you know?
Modern society's pre-written beauty standards and whatnot. So very excited about this, and it's going to get real, you guys. It super is. We're going to be real, folks. Sarah and I met probably on LiveJournal, probably through Fashionista, which was a LiveJournal group that was really popular and really radical for a time. And then at the time I was writing some blog posts for Big Fat Blog, and Sarah was doing her blog, Not Blue at All. And then we just became magical together. There's a sparkle simmering over us right now with all of us. Like the first time we met, I came to a conference in Oakland, and you brought me. That was magical. You brought me a sequin black dress to wear, and we were.
Why the fuck do I care? I mean, I'm not trying to be a bitch, but what are we talking? What is the topic for today's podcast? We are 3.5 minutes in. You're still talking about how you met and stuff, but not in a concise way. They're really kind of dragging it out. Don't get me wrong. I have times where I will have significant pauses in when I speak, and I try to edit most of those out. I almost feel like there was no editing done to this audio at all. They recorded it as a one and done, and then just straight uploaded it. And I'm sorry, but they're getting on my nerves. I'm going to up this to 1.3 speed and see if that helps.
These tight-ass dresses to the feminist dance party. That was amazing. And we danced with Salt and Peppa. Thank you very much. We did. And then we talked in the lobby for a million hours or something. Well, it was 2 nights. The first night we had dinner with your whole group. I don't know why we're telling this whole story. And then we spent 3 hours in the lobby talking. And
I don't know why they're telling this story either. I don't really care. This is not related to the podcast at all.
And the next night I came just for the feminist dance party at the end of your conference. So it wasn't like I had never met you and just showed up with a friggin' dress to wear, although with you I feel like that's okay. But anyway, no, the greatest part was that I had shipped you a coat years ago. I had bought a down coat for, I don't know what trip I went on because I don't travel much and I live in California. Why would I need this down coat? But I had sent it to you. And when I met you, you handed me the gloves that were still in the pockets when I shipped it to you. And I still have those gloves. So that was the coolest part, I thought. It means more to me now because of the journey they took with you. And I wore that coat through hella Wisconsin winters. And then it's that's the spirit.
Why the fuck do I give a shit about this down coat? I don't get, I'm really trying not to be a major bitch, but we're approaching 5 minutes into the podcast here, and they're just rambling, and I'm great, y'all are friends. That's great. I don't need all this backstory. This backstory, if you really wanted to address it, might be able to be tied in to other episodes, but you guys are investing entirely too much time about talking about yourselves and not what you're advertising the podcast to be. If I were actually interested in this and not doing it for a reaction, I would have noped out of this a couple minutes ago. I've gotten better at reducing my intros to preferably no more than 30 seconds. But a max, I try to aim for nothing more than a minute, because the goal is to get into the video content, and it's much the same with podcasts. The goal is to get into the content fairly quickly. That's why people are here.
All of us is we're just we share and we look out for each other. We're just super besties.
I just want you guys to know I'm editing out a lot of the obnoxious music in this.
So, Fat as Fuck actually comes from, I was on Facebook and somebody had posted.
This would have been you should have cut out that whole thing about how you guys originally met. We don't fucking care. Starting the Fat as Fuck would have been the start point. You guys each get 30-second intros, maybe 1-minute intros, and then you go straight into why you started this podcast. That would have been the place to start. This ended up being a critique, and it's not. I don't mean for it to be, but let's fucking get to the point.
Something if you could teach any fat studies class, what would you teach and why? And so I do fat studies in academia. I'm also a fat activist. And the thing that I said because I thought it was super clever. I was like, because in my head I'm like, I want to do something about fat and sexuality, and I was like, I would name it Fat as Fuck. But then I was like, that would never go over in academia. Like, they would never let me title a class that, even if I got to teach something like that. And so it was kind of like this thing that I put out there that I was like, nobody will steal that because that's mine. And a year and a half ago or so, maybe 2 years ago, I started thinking about doing a fat sexuality workshop, and was like, well, this is my opportunity to do a Fat as Fuck. And I started doing them. I did a fat sexuality workshop at the Tool Shed in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and then more recently did a fat sexuality workshop at Abundia, which is a retreat that happens just outside of Chicago every year. And then I sort of wanted to do a podcast for a long time. What would my podcast be? I talked to friends about doing this podcast, and then I just never did the thing. And then I was like, well, maybe if Sarah does it with me, then I will be motivated to do the thing. And then I was like, Sarah, would you be my one and only podcast buddy? And she said,
this is entirely too much detail. Like, okay, you got the idea while you were in class. It didn't resonate, so you got your friend. Like, there's a way to condense this all down. We don't need the minute details. I've noticed that it's not just fat acceptance. I've noticed that there's this trend with people that either expect you to know what they're thinking, or they go into entirely too much detail. Like, there's a happy medium for giving just enough context to get into it and going into a long spiel, or just like going into it and expecting people to know what the fuck you're doing.
Yeah. Yes, happily your Ed McMahon for life. I don't know if anyone will get that. I bet a lot of people will get that reference. I need to quit assuming people are so much under.
Yeah. What do we want to do? What are our goals?
Yeah.
What are our lofty goals?
What is our deal?
Yeah.
Fat as Fuck is all about sex and fat bodies and how the two entwine. Oh, baby. We're all about sex positivity and fat liberation. Really, we just want to start an open dialogue and really get into the nitty-gritty of what fat bodies are, what it's like to have sex in one, with one, in one. That's a weird thing to say. But we really want to just dive into the topic. As one, when dose become uno. That's a quote from a British show called Miranda. Anyway, I'm obsessed. But really, we want to get into all those topics that people want to talk about, but they're afraid to talk about, or maybe only talk about it in a secret forum online and under an assumed name. And no, we just want to just lay it out there and just talk about it and really talk about all the stuff we don't want, like our insecurities, because I think that's a big and recurring one for any human living within a flesh prison. So why Fat as Fuck? Because taboos around sex and around fatness, that fat bodies are sexual and they can be a sexual asset, and we strive to help others see the possibilities fat bodies hold. And it's not about waiting to do something, until you have such and such duty standard in place. It's about deciding for yourself what you want and going after it and enjoying the things that you've always been told you're not allowed to because you're fat. So for me, that was a huge part of wanting to be a part of it. And I'm so glad Michaela asked me to be.
Obviously, Fat as Fuck is another reclamation of a term and a way to take that back. But also, I'm a big fan of the word fuck. And
Totally.
I used to have a blog called Finessing the Fuck You, because I think having somewhat of a fuck you attitude about these kinds of things is good for us. We're fat as fuck, and we also do fuck, so that's a thing.
And well, and how. No, just kidding.
And I really think that the two workshops that I've done, I know that people really, really were grateful to just be having a conversation, and that's really what I wanted to do, is just when you get to sit in a room of fat people and talk about sex openly, talk about your good and bad experiences and things that worked and things that didn't.
And I don't know if I ever told you this, but I once sat in a workshop for fat people around the topic of not having sex. So that's kind of a unique perspective too. It was at a feminist conference, and it just reminded me just now that was the thing I went to. So I would love to talk about that, but also other types of sex. Like, this is hopefully not going to be a heteronormative discussion. We want to talk about queer sex and the whole spectrum of LGBTQA.
So I feel to a certain extent like I don't have a leg to stand on in saying this because my content is very reactionary and off the cuff. So I don't script my things. That being said, I'm also not trying to promote any sort of viewpoint in any particular way. I'm simply giving my opinions on this. They are trying to either normalize fat sex or whatever the fuck they're trying to do. I feel like they could. It doesn't even necessarily have to be a script that they have because it is a podcast, it is a conversation, but maybe have bullet points and try to stick to the points because it really kind of feels like they're all over the place.
And really get into exactly that. Like, it's okay to not want sex or to not give sex to your partner for whatever reason, or, you know, really empowering you to do the things you want regardless of your orientation or, you know, how you were raised or all of that.
Yeah. And that's really important to me as well. Like, I think that, you know, you should be able to do what you want or not do what you don't want to do. You know, like, I really am bothered by this idea, often in the sort of like sex positive-ish community. Sometimes it gets wrapped up in this idea, or people get sort of swept away in this idea that like sex is natural, and like people who aren't sexual, there's something wrong with them, which is of course not the case. Like, we have a natural diversity in our sexual urges. It makes sense, just like everything else in the human condition. And so I think that's important. I think it's also important to challenge yourself if you want to do certain things, to push yourself out of your comfort zone or whatever, but to not do that for somebody else's sake and not do that because other people think you should. One of the things that I did when I did this workshop was I put together a handout for people. It was both about, you know, fat sex tips, but also like tips to people who are partners of fat people. I've had people express to me, not to me necessarily, but in general, that, you know, they'd be really frustrated that their partner didn't love their body more and blah, blah, blah. And like, that's not your position to say, like, that somebody else should be more comfortable with X or Y. And you can't make somebody else more comfortable in trying to do something.
So far, the few points that they're making, like, I'm not against. I agree there's diversity in sexual desire and sexual expression, 100%. And no one should be forced to do anything, sexual or otherwise, that they aren't comfortable with. Especially, you know, sexually, it's that's a consent issue right there. But like, I'm still not 100% getting like what their point, other than just kind of introducing what they're I guess going to be doing. But also, and I don't mean to be a bitch, but does anyone notice like the really heavy breathing that you hear? Like, even though this is sped up, you can hear the heavy breathing.
It was really, really like detrimental. So if somebody wants to have a goal to be more comfortable in their body or do different things sexually or not do them, like, that's fine, but respect other people's wishes and goals, and like, it's like, it's not for you to say, I guess.
And boundaries.
Boundaries! Consent!
We love boundaries.
We do. They're great. It's so sexy when people respect boundaries. Oh,
it really is. And consent, we'll definitely get into that, because for me, I've had so many conversations with people who are like, that's so awkward and weird. Why would you ask before you hug or kiss someone? I'm like, because I want to know they want me to kiss them. Why is that a question? Like, no, I don't want to do the lean in and then find out I'm that like poo monster that's coming at them. Like, no, nobody wants that. I want to be wanted, damn it.
And here's the thing about that is like, why is it awkward to ask? Well, because we weave into our social norms this idea that like we can do things without consent in the first place, or that we don't want to have conversations about it. So, you know, we want to be fine talking about sex and being sexual and sexy, but like talking about actual sex with another human being, like, makes people really uncomfortable. If you don't get taught about sex or like safer sex, let alone how to communicate about sex with each other.
Definitely. And I was lucky to have a sex education in the era of Magic Johnson coming out and saying he was diagnosed with HIV. So my sex education was pretty extensive, I would say, especially around, we called them STDs at the time. Now they're STIs. No one announced that to me. Had to find that out from the interwebs. But it's always been the first thing I think about when I want to have sex with somebody new. But it's also, I would say, depending on, I think sex education is like an age thing, as to what type of education they receive, but also a regional thing, because I think there are parts of the country where there is no sex education or it's abstinence only.
So far, like, again, sex education, that's great and everything. This is more like general sex talk and not specific to fat sex. Like, they call this podcast Fat as Fuck. But we're not really getting into a whole lot of, like, fat sex. It's, like, there's been very general sexual topics covered, but not specifically fat sex. I might go ahead, and we're only a few minutes away from reaching halfway through. I'm going to stop it halfway. We'll probably end the part here, but if I make another part of this, we're going to go straight to episode 2. There were only ever 3 episodes of this. I don't really care about covering number 3, which is just about masturbation, but the episode 2 is called Fat Sexual Possibilities, so that might be interesting. I just want to see if they get to any significant point within the next few minutes.
Stuff, and that's really its own scary can of worms, we'll say. But I'm really glad I had what I said, and I really am passionate about, spreading the good word, if you will. I always say the cause. You're down for the cause. But usually when I say that, so I'm already going to go TMI. This is who I am as a person. Usually when I say, like, I appreciate you being down for the cause, that usually means I appreciate them being super fucking excited to make me come. And I'm not going to lie, that is a turn on. Down for the cause. That's all I'm saying. But I think that's all we want. We want to connect with another human being and get off. So the way.
I just want to say, because I'm cutting out the music. I don't know if it's copyrighted or what the fuck ever, but it's really fucking annoying. I just want to say that.
That I approach sex, and I think Sarah does too, and which is probably pretty obvious at this point, is that I just want to be not just authentic, but to really, I really want to be, Sarah, what's the word? I was thinking like forward, open, a little crass maybe.
Like decisive, pointed.
Yeah, maybe pointed is a good way to say it. Because, I grew up a little bit later than you, and I don't believe that I have any kind of very good formal sex education. I think we went over STDs in health class, and some people saw a live birth, the whole, like, scare you thing. But where I did get my sex education was Talk Sex with Sue Johansson.
Yeah.
And that woman, she was just everything that I wanted to be.
I was late to that party of discovering her on TV or whatever, but you're right. That was a big, and in the 80s we had Dr. Ruth, so I don't know if you would even be of an age to remember that, but Dr. Ruth was hot on the talk show circuit, talking about everyone's sex problems, and she was like a hot little celebrity. Yeah, she was an older German lady, very petite, but she also like kind of changed up the sex toy industry at the time too, and she did a lot. So yeah, I mean, for me it was Dr. Ruth first, and then Sue Johansson, and then later Betty Dodd, who had a column in Bust magazine that I adored just all the time. It was so good every time.
I remember, like, Sue Johansson just sitting there on TV, and she does her sex toy reviews, and she's talking about anal sex. That's not something that anyone, let alone someone who looks like my grandma, talked about just casually, openly.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm really fucking bored with this. Like, they're not really getting to the point, and I don't really feel like listening to it for another 20 minutes, so we're going to go ahead and end this part here. I've kind of said what I want. Like, they don't really get to any significant point. We're going to try one more. It would be the only one that I can see of, like, we already went through halfway through episode 1. There's only 3 episodes available. I don't care about the 3rd episode on masturbation, so we'll try Fat Sexual Possibilities and see if that's worth anything in terms of, like, entertainment. But yeah, I can't. Nothing's really happened. Like, they're talking about their history with sex education. Great. Like, I don't. Like, they're not getting on any sort of topic exactly. So I don't really know. I mean, they label this. Here's the little synopsis of the Fat AF podcast. It says, Fat AF is dedicated to sex positivity and fat liberation. Our aim is to stimulate open dialogue about fatness and sexuality by focusing on new topics every episode, interviewing guests, and speaking frankly about fat sex. We believe fat bodies are a sexual asset and strive to help others see the possibilities fat bodies hold. We haven't gotten into any of that, really. So, and we're 20 minutes into the first episode. I don't really care. We'll try episode 2. We'll try half of episode 2 for one more video. And then I'm not going to bother with episode 3. If episode 2 holds anything of value, we'll go ahead and do a 2-parter on it and finish the second part. But so far, with how rambly these girls are, like, there's nothing really to comment on. There's nothing really going on here. But since I put out a poll on this, I wanted to give you guys an idea of what this was set up like. So only 3 episodes. It was done. It started and ended in 2018. So I guess we'll just see. We shall just see. So with all that said, thank you so much for watching. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.